Welcome to today's episode of Insights with Us. I'm Anastasia, a trauma therapist, owner of Happy Mind Wellness Company, a Colorado-based therapy practice, and creator of this podcast. My goal is to use this platform to help others find their voice as we share our journeys and show support as we learn more about ourselves and life. Growth happens when we get uncomfortable, which happens when we sit with new ideas we haven't sat with before. I hope that we can work on this journey of personal growth and understanding together. As a disclaimer, there may be swearing in this podcast, but sometimes we get caught up in the human experience. It happens. And sometimes we can talk about difficult or activating topics. So maybe put on some headphones if you need to, and remember that support exists for you if you want it. Today, I am joined by author and coach Gwyneth Flack, talking about her latest book, Limitless, Transform Your Life with Intuition and Creativity. Gwyneth helps others tap into their inner wisdom, amplify their creativity, and cultivate deeper, more fulfilling relationships. Her latest book focuses on listening to your intuition and managing overthinking while you learn to listen to your inner voice. You can find Gwyneth on social media at Gwyneth R. Flack. That's GWYNETHRFLACK. You can also check out her website, gwynethflack.com. And you can find her book, Limitless, anywhere you buy your books. So let's get started and see if we can build some insight today. All right, welcome, Gwyneth, to Insights with Us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I am so excited you're here, and I'm so excited to talk about your book in this next hour. And so I wanted to start just by, you're an author, you're a published author. Your book is about to release. And so I'm really curious if this is where you would expected to be, if this is your dream, or if you sort of happened into this.
That's a great question. And there's two parts to the answer because I never expected to be teaching what I teach. I never expected to be doing this kind of work. But I always loved writing. So ever since I could write, I started to write poems. And then I was, occasionally winning a poetry contest when I was in middle school and high school. And then I started to write novels when I was in my 20s. And I went to some writers' conferences, like got scholarships to the Breadloaf Writers Conference and these other kinds of writing retreats where they would support you to go write. And I got a literary agent in New York City, a really good literary agent. So I was really focused on writing novels, writing fiction. But then I had always had this just never-ending curiosity and interest in people and in our patterns of thinking and why we behave the way that we do. And I've always loved looking at different cultures because I was born in New Zealand as it was. So I had come to the US when I was 6 and my mom's from England, my dad's American, that kind of thing. So I had always had this deep interest in people and cultures. And then I think that that's why then I was writing all these characters in these books. I was putting all of that interest in humans and why did they do the things they do? Let's explore that through fiction. And then the opportunity came up for me to take some classes in California, spiritual growth meditation classes. So then my husband and I, actually it was right before we got married, and then the summer that we got married, we were flying out to California and doing these classes. And the spiritual growth that I was experiencing, the healing that I was experiencing was really amazingly transformational for me and really freeing. And I was only doing it because I loved it so much. So it was just for the pure love of it. But then when I would come back home after flying to California, and being gone for just a short time, 4 days or whatever it would be, and come back to Vermont, friends and even friends of friends started to say, wow, you seem like you're really happy. You seem like things are going really well. What are you doing? And I was like, oh, well, I'm doing my writing. I said, but I'm also taking these great classes. And I said, if you ever want to, you could also fly out to this place in California. And they said, well, why don't you teach us? And I never anticipated being a teacher. I didn't expect to do that. And so I said, okay, I'll just teach you a short set of classes, because at that point I'd had quite a lot of training. I'd had quite, a number of years of training. And so the first time I taught, I thought to myself, just once, I'll just do this one series of
Just
classes.
give them some information. It was so
Yeah, because
transformative to me. I'll just like spread the love,
yeah,
and then it's
because
stuck.
exactly. Because they didn't want to fly out to California. And so then another group of people asked me to teach them. So I was like, okay, I'll just do it this once. And so it went like that. It
Wow.
was unexpected. And then I ended up eventually having a center. So for a while I was just traveling around teaching, and then for 10 years people just came to me and I taught from my center. So
And what did your center actually teach? Like, what is this transformative mindfulness that you were teaching people?
so intuitive development classes.
Okay.
And so it just happened that most of my students who came to me to learn all different types of intuitive development classes, and it just by chance the way it happened. I mean, nothing's really by by chance, I guess, but the people that were drawn to come to these classes ended up being people like mental health professionals and nurses and doctors and a neurologist and professors and school teachers. And so I started to notice that the people that were coming to me wanted to learn how to manage the energy that they were encountering every day in their work, because all of them were big healers. All of them were in service really to humanity, or in service to their communities, in service out there.
I know exactly what that's like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this chance to help other people be grounded in their own intuitiveness
Yes.
and find that balance so that they can move forward and help others.
Exactly. So I was teaching them tools that they could use on the go in their busy lives, in their busy, challenging careers and lives, and with their family or in their relationships. So basically what they were learning was they had lots of training in their area. So they didn't need any training in that area. What they
Yeah.
needed was something that they hadn't yet received, that's really kind of an underutilized area of our lives. How do we tap into our inner guidance system, our inner knowing, our intuition, and as a way to heal ourselves, as a way to become more grounded in an ungrounded world, right? Because nature is really grounded, but the world itself is not grounded. And the world is a very ungrounding place. And if you're out there feeling ungrounded and also helping lots of people, then it's very easy to end up feeling overwhelmed or burnt out or that kind of thing.
Oh, that is such an important question. Not even how do we follow our inner voice, but how do we even notice our inner voice is there? Like, how do we tap into what already exists? Because you're right, this world is chaotic and filled with constant information and ideas around you have to do this, or you should show up that way, or this is what you should wear, or this is how you need to exercise. It's just constant bombardment of information that has nothing to do with what is truly deeply right for us.
Exactly. I mean, that's a perfect description of the world that we're living in, and it's gotten more and more intense, I would say.
Yeah. Oh, I agree with that.
Really,
So how do we tap into our inner guidance system?
yeah. So I mean, we are all intuitive. We all have that inner guidance system. It's just that starting from day one, when we go off to school, when we go off to kindergarten, we're just not given any tools to maintain that part of ourselves. So we're born intuitive, we're born like that. And when you talk to a toddler, they sometimes say incredibly wise things. They're so authentic and honest, and they're just looking at the world through innocent eyes. And they'll often just say something that's really true, but they're not saying it with any agenda or anything like that. You know what I mean? They're just being honest. They're just being themselves. So we end up entering into the school system. And of course, we know that it's great to get a great education, and that's really important. But we end up working out just the intellectual part of ourselves and getting thrown into a very competitive environment at a young age, where all of a sudden we're going, ooh, I need to get better grades before we've really established a strong foundation, I think, for ourselves. We're thrown into a very intellect driven environment, test driven, competitive environment. And so that's when we start to lose that inner compass, or that inner awareness. It's there. It's just that we lose our access to it. And and so it's like an underutilized muscle, really. It's just the part that didn't get worked out enough. And when we start to develop and get back in touch with that part of ourselves, the more we validate it, or the more we kind of say hello to it or celebrate it, or just notice when our intuition or inner guidance system, there's so many different words you could use for it, but when we notice that it gave us some kind of useful information, and if we just pause for a second and go, there it is. It's there.
Yeah.
And it's really a quiet part of ourselves. That's the other thing. I mean, sometimes that part of ourselves can be loud, but so often our intellectual training, or the intellectual part of ourselves, which of course, like I said, is valuable in and of itself, but our intuition, it doesn't have any agenda. It just gives us very simple, straightforward information or feedback. And so it's not going to defend itself, whereas the intellectual part of ourselves is the part that is trained to defend itself, right? Like when a person gets their PhD, you have to defend your thesis, right?
Yeah.
Which is
Mhm.
kind of a great literal and metaphorical.
Yeah. I was gonna say, you said
Um,
that like the inner voice doesn't really have a motivation, right? It's just there being its authentic self. So it
yeah.
sounds like the intellect, the intellectualizing part of us, like that's the one that maybe has a motivation, do you
Well,
think?
it just does what it does. The intellectual part of ourselves really is in many ways trained to critique. For
Yeah.
example, critical thinking, we know it's really important to have critical thinking skills. But something really interesting happens, at least I've noticed, is that our critical thinking, when it's not being guided in a clear direction, like if we apply our critical thinking in a really, hey, I have a 24-hour road trip ahead, and I'm going to use my critical thinking to figure out what the best route is. But when our critical thinking is left unchecked and we just put our creative power into it,
Hmm.
it can turn into self-critical thinking very easily. So the intuitive part of ourselves isn't the part of ourselves that's overthinking or second guessing or doubting or being self-critical, that's the intellectual part of ourselves. And it's not because there's anything wrong with it. It's just because it needs to be guided. It
Mhm.
needs to be guided by us. And we can guide it when we're tapping into our own inner guidance system or our intuitive knowing. That part of ourselves can say, quiet down. Let's take a pause,
Yeah.
intellect.
Yeah, I agree with this. I say that all the time in my work and in this podcast, where like intellectualizing has a purpose. It is really helpful. You know, it helps us
Yeah.
understand the variables. It helps us figure out how to survive really stressful situations where we need to think critically. Like it's very useful. But if we never slow down, if all we do is intellectualize all the time, then yeah, you're right. It's this disconnect from who we are, our experiences. We stop paying attention to our feelings. We just think about them, right? There's not a lot of return to self. And so that's what I'm hearing you say is like that return to self, being able to hear that intuitive voice. You said creativity. It like helps maybe feed that creativity. Is that what you're saying? How do they play together?
So we're creative beings. All of us are creative beings, and we have all this creative power. We're so much more powerful than we give ourselves credit for.
Mm.
And so we have this creative power, but we can put our creative power anywhere we want. It's our choice or our free will to do that. So we can actually put it into worrying, or we could put it into drama, or we could put it into criticizing ourselves, or we can put that incredible creative power into, for one person, it might be, oh, I want to write a book. For another person, it might be, oh, I want to learn how to be a really great parent to my child, or I want to put my creative power into improving my relationship, or building a business, or being a public speaker. So it's it's our intuition really that can guide our creative power. So it's really, I think it's fun to really think about ourselves as creative beings. And where do I want to put my creativity? Wait a second. I think I just put my creativity into worrying about, my daughter all afternoon when I probably didn't need to worry as much about her. And I could have put that creativity instead into working on, chapter 5 or something of,
Yeah.
or working on my vegetable garden or something like
Yeah.
that.
I really appreciate the where do I want to put my creativity and how the examples you gave are so different because so often there's a should there, right? What should I be doing? How should I show up? What will make me that money versus where does my passion lie? When I am being creative, what can that look like? And it might be professional creativity, but it could also be personal creativity. And it's all important.
Yeah, exactly. And our intuition is there to guide us in the most aligned way for us, taking into consideration the skills that we have, the abilities that we have. We might be looking for a place, a really healthy outlet for our creativity, or we might be looking for what's my deeper purpose. Let's say a person already graduated from college and they have a degree or a couple of degrees and they have their job, and what's my next direction? What else can I do with my skills and abilities? And your intuition or your inner guidance system can point you in a direction that's really aligned for you, because sometimes as healers, it doesn't really matter what your job is. If you're somebody that really cares about the well-being of others and you want to improve the world in whatever way that is, whether that's just having a nice conversation with somebody at the grocery store, or whether that's starting a nonprofit, whatever it is. But when you're somebody that really cares about the well-being of others, sometimes you have all this creative energy and you can end up sometimes somebody says, well, why don't you do this thing? And so you go, okay, I'll go do that thing, but it's not really the right place for you to be. It may not really be actually the right match.
Yeah.
Whereas if you listen to your inner guidance will say, well, that is a great area to go into, but have you tried this other thing? Maybe you should start a podcast, for example,
That was definitely an inner guidance system. That was not a plan. Yeah, okay. And bringing it back to your life, if you're willing to share, because talking about how you got into this, you loved the classes for yourself. You talked about this transformative experience you had, and people kept wanting you to teach. You go, okay, well, but just this one. So that alignment, that moment where you're like, okay, yes, this is my creativity. I want to lean into this. What was that moment like for you?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. There was a point at which I just started to realize, well, maybe I'll just keep doing this. Maybe I'll start to focus on this more. And it all kind of happened naturally as well. Right before I got pregnant is when I started to teach, and then I had her. And so I was focused partly on being a mom at home with her when she was young. And so it was a natural evolution, but there was a point at which, as she got more independent, I started to think, oh, yeah, okay, I'll do another class. I'll teach another class and I'll teach another class. And
Mhm.
so it just it continued, I would say, in a pretty natural evolution. But there was a point at which I thought, okay, I guess that's really what I meant to be doing. And in my case, rather than being focused on the creative writing and the novels, that kind of thing, it became apparent that really this was where my passion was. I just never thought of myself as a teacher because I never thought about, when I was growing up, I thought, and my mom actually had been a professor, and I thought, well, a teacher is a teacher at a school or a professor or something like that. I'm not a teacher. I don't know that I have something to offer as a teacher. And it's so funny that I thought that. So there was a point at which I realized, oh, I do have something very specific to offer that could help people, which really had always been my goal. I always had wanted to do something that would help people.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to be able to write as well, which so now I'm putting the two things together. But yeah, it's been an interesting journey. And because we're always students. I think if you're a teacher, the moment that you just think you're a teacher and you're not a student,
Yep.
then you stop growing.
There's
And
always
so
more to learn.
yeah, so I love being a student always of the world.
Mhm.
And if I wasn't always a student, there's no way that I could keep growing as a teacher.
I knew there was a reason we connected. Uh, I also, okay, I have to connect with you on this because I always wanted to be a teacher, but I
Oh,
wanted to be professor because in my brain, I was like, well, I don't want to do like grade school, but I want to teach. I have
yeah.
to become a professor. So that was always my plan. And then life pulled me into the therapy route. And I didn't become a teacher, but I always loved teaching. And
Ah,
so I started the podcast because I wanted to expand my base in the information that I get to share. And then I have guests because now I get to learn from all of you while I still continue to teach different concepts and sink into things. So it's just really goes to show that if you feel a pull towards something, if you can notice that pull, even if it's surprising or different or not at all what you expected, it could end up being something that feels really right.
yeah, exactly. And that is, I think, so much how it goes for people in life. Like you have an interest, but you don't realize the way you could apply it.
Hmm.
You think of, you go into some area and you don't realize, oh, I'm in the right general area, but really the way that I can focus it is this, or one thing just leads to another. But yeah, when I listen to your solo episodes, some of your solo episodes, I love them, and you definitely you're in that teaching zone when you're doing those.
And it feel like I feel so creative in a way that I
Yeah,
don't get to tap into as a therapist. As a therapist, I'm primarily holding space for whatever the client brings. In
yeah,
the solo episode space, it's like, what do I want to teach? What do I want to share? What can I play with?
yeah,
And so okay, I want to bring it back to the overthinking piece that you had
yeah.
mentioned previously, because I was a perfectionist. I was a hardcore intellectualizer. I overthought everything for most of my life, until I really started doing a lot of self work. And so when I started this podcast, it took me like a solid 4 to 5 months of practicing recording and editing and like playing around with friends before I was even willing to think about posting any episodes. Like there was so much internal barrier to doing that work. So I'm giving you this example, and I'm curious if you can kind of apply it to what you've written about, what you teach. Like, how does overthinking kind of play into this space of intuitiveness?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I was born into a family of heavy duty overthinkers and very intellectual people.
Yeah. I
Like
think a lot of us do.
my dad and my mom both have PhDs in the sciences. And, so it's very much like that heavy thinking kind of energy. And I think there's so much of that in our culture. I think that the heavy duty overthinking and doubting ourselves and questioning ourselves, and that's also, I think, where a lot of that perfectionism comes from, and the self-critical thinking.
I want to sink into something you said there,
Okay.
because you equated overthinking to doubt. And that just feels really
Oh
important,
yeah.
because I think a lot of overthinkers are like, no, I just want to know the answer. And there's just so many variables. Like, I need to think about it. And no, 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 I can't act right away because I need to understand what's happening. Like, they
Right.
don't identify it as doubt.
Right.
So that just felt really important when you said
Yes.
that.
Yes, that's so true. The lack of trusting ourselves, the intellectual part of ourselves thinks that if it just thinks enough, it can outthink everything.
Oh, it's so true. I just have to figure this out and then I'll be totally fine, while your brain is screaming, like, no, this does not feel right. Please just say no and walk away. And you're like, no, 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 no. I just need to think about it harder.
That's exactly it. And we oftentimes cannot come up with the answers until we metaphorically or literally walk away and have a pause from it. So we can get ourselves so worked up into this. I'm going to think about every option. If I just keep on thinking about it, I'm going to get the answer. I'm going to get through to the other side of this. But wait, what about this and what about that? But the moment we just decide, you know what, I'm stepping outside of this game, it's intellect on overload at that point. The intellect is just, woo, the analytical, what I call the analytical processing part of ourselves gets turned up really high. And so we can't stop analyzing until we walk away from it. And walking away from it could be as simple as you just sit down, you have a cup of tea, you stop thinking about it for a while, or it could be, I'm going to go take a walk. But really, energetically, what it is you're going to give it some space and you're going to create within yourself a pause. So we have to give ourselves the opportunity to turn down that analyzing part of ourselves. And then something amazing happens, which is, and I'm sure you've probably experienced this, or the listeners probably have too. You suddenly receive the answer or the resource that you need for the next step as soon as you walk away from it. And and turn down that part of yourself. I teach my students how to turn down, just gently turn down the over analyzing part, because that's really one of the first steps to being able to access our intuition or our inner guidance system is getting more grounded, being able to ground ourselves. And when I say that, I mean like through a visualization in your mind, grounding yourself, not through anything that we need to do outside of ourselves, although exercise is very grounding, but we don't always have time to exercise, right? So we want to be able to ground ourselves through a visualization in our mind, and then so that way we can just do it anywhere, anytime kind of thing. And then of course exercise is always great for us, but exercise also turns down the analyzing part of ourselves, so we have that pause. But once again, it's nice not to be too reliant on I have to go exercise or I can't stop thinking or I can't get grounded.
Ooh, I
It's
have a
nice.
story about that.
Oh, good. Tell me.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm a big believer in curiosity, right? That slowing down and intentionally figuring out where you need to go, not just this is how it's always been, so this is what I have to do, right? And I learned that the hard way because I was a very big exerciser. I was a huge jock growing up. And so whenever I got stressed, I would just work out. And when I was in grad school, which is so overwhelmingly challenging, I was working a job and doing a part time internship and doing full time school. And like, it's just so much all at
Wow.
once. And so I was really overwhelmed and really stressed. And my brain went, you're stressed, you need to exercise. But I was so far past my normal level of stress at that point that going for a run, when it accelerated my heart rate, it actually caused me to have a panic attack.
Wow. Yeah.
So it like felt like a panic attack. So my brain was so
Mhm.
stressed, it went, oh, you're having a panic attack. And then it just let me have one.
Mhm.
And that was a big moment for me of, oh, not all moments are created equal. You actually have to slow down to check in with yourself to figure out what you actually need to show up in order to feel better.
Yes. Yeah. That was a huge moment for you.
Yeah. Yeah. So ever since then, anytime am like, oh, I need to exercise, I pause and I go, wait, do I actually need to exercise or do I just feel like I should exercise? What kind of exercise would actually help me? Maybe it's yoga. Maybe it is going for a run. Maybe I actually do just need to sit on the couch in a cozy blanket to reset my nervous system before I choose any actions. And so it's that
Yes.
pause that you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's so important.
Yeah, you have to give yourself some space. We're so trained from day one, going back to like kindergarten or first grade, we're trained to just override everything, just keep on going, and just to the detriment of our well-being, just
Yeah.
keep overriding our feelings or overriding our inner guidance system in favor of what the intellect is demanding that we do, the to-do list and all the training, the intellectual training that we've received. And so it's really easy to get completely out of touch with our true feelings or with what our body's intelligence is telling us, with what our body
Mhm.
needs.
Yeah. And then you're burned out and exhausted and feel like you're doing something wrong because you should be able to just push through it and override it.
Exactly. Yes. And there's always that, oh, you could just do some more, just do some more.
Mm.
Everybody else seems to be doing more than you, so you have to do more. It's a real hamster wheel.
It really is. Oh, so basically getting off the hamster wheel and actually pausing and going, is this the hamster wheel I want to be on? Maybe I want to be on that hamster wheel. That one isn't even a hamster wheel, but it's moving in a way that feels right to me, and being able to actually choose that for yourself in whatever feels creative for you.
Yeah. And asking within ourselves, what do I really want? What is really aligned for me? What brings me joy? What you know, makes me feel connected to other people or to my community, to the world around me. Just asking yourself questions and saying hello to the intuitive part of yourself. So, noticing the difference between an intellectual question and a question addressed to the infinite you,
Mm.
to the bigger, brighter part of yourself, that part of yourself that's not about your age or your um, the way that you look to the outside world or your training. There's this bigger, brighter part of ourselves, this aspect of ourselves that really just, if we welcome it and we say hello to it and we start to become friends with it and tap into that intuitive part of ourselves, then that part of ourselves can have more space to show up in our lives. But we're just not given any information about that from day one. So it's not our fault. It's just something that's why so often as adults, we end up circling back to that. We go through life and we get all that training, the schooling and the training, and we jump into a full, very busy, often overly busy life. And then we start to circle back to, wow, what's missing? There's something missing. And so often it's just that connection with ourselves to what's beyond our age and our intellect and our outer appearance. And it's that part of ourselves that's infinitely creative and infinitely loving too.
That's
So the
beautiful.
self love starts to show up as well when we tap into that part of ourselves, because that's not so much the realm of the intellect. The our the intuitive part of ourselves is always guiding us, or pointing us, at least trying to guide us back to loving ourselves, or to accepting ourselves. Just accepting ourselves is a great starting point as we are.
Well, and if you're so used to living in the box, following the should, doing what you're trained to do, and overriding your system, I mean, it's very hard to trust that that voice is real and that it is authentic.
Yes, I think that's a really good point. It is it, and that's why you just work at it gently. Like, you notice when you get some kind of an intuitive um, tug or an intuitive nudge, and you notice, okay, I ignored it. I was going to choose to. I was trying to decide which restaurant to go to, something as simple as that. And I was really pulled toward the Thai restaurant, but then I went to the Italian restaurant, and I went to the Italian restaurant, and then I realized, oh, I should have gone, like that kind of thing. So if you start to tap into your intuition in a low stakes way, I guess that's what I mean. Picking a restaurant is not a big deal. And if it goes well and we end up with a great meal, but hey, if
Yeah, even if you chose the wrong one, quotation marks, wrong one, being able to pause and go, I really wish I had picked the other restaurant. Next
yeah,
time I should pay attention to that feeling.
yeah, or okay, which place do I want to go for a weekend away? I want, and letting your intuition guide you on that is another way to play with it in a low stakes way. There's so many ways that you can play with it in a low stakes way, like when you go grocery shopping and this bag of oranges or that bag of oranges, which one seems to be the fresher bag, whatever it might be. So then when the bigger questions come up, you're going to have more trust with it. So a lot of times what happens is people, they they're going along in their lives, and then something big happens and they really feel like they need intuitive guidance, but because they haven't been tapping into it or trusting it, then it's harder to trust it for those really big decisions. Maybe that big decision for somebody is, which career do I choose? Which country do I move to, or which state do I move to? Which partner do I choose?
Yeah. Do I stay with this person or do I trust that maybe there's someone out there that's a better fit for me?
Right. And so that's why you start building the little, you build a relationship with your intuition with the little things like your cross country skiing. Do I go right or do I go left? Ooh, I went right and I saw a fox in the snow and it was really beautiful. I'm so glad I listened to my intuition. I went right. Or you didn't go right and you take the trail that goes off to the left and then you get to a point where there's a big tree that's over the trail and you go, oh, that's why I was guided to go right and I went
Mhm.
left.
Or even which podcast to listen to.
Yeah.
There's so many options out there. So, those of you listening to this one, thanks for choosing. Hopefully, it feels right. But also, right? Like I'll open up my podcast app and be like, what do I want to listen to? Does it want to be informative? Do I want to like listen to humor today? Do I just want to like zone out to something random? Like there's so many options and there's no wrong answer. So you might as well just pick whichever one is calling you in that moment.
Yeah, because oftentimes you'll notice right away, oh, I know why I chose that podcast. That's just what I needed to hear.
Mhm.
Or, oh, I know why I picked that book off the shelf. That was exactly the kind of information that I was looking for, whatever that information was. And so if you pause and you go, ooh, that was my inner guidance system. That wasn't my intellect. And so noticing the difference because there's a quality in there's like an a quality in the vibe of it or the energy of your intuition versus your intellect. And there's a purpose for both. And so if you start to distinguish between and even ask the question, was that my intellect giving me information or was that my intuition giving me information? And of course, you want your intellect to help you with, say, editing, let's just say, right? If you're
Mhm.
writing, your intellect's going to help you put it into a structure, but you want your intuition to give you a great idea for what you're going to write about.
Yeah.
And so your intuition is going to give you that idea. Oh, here, you should do write about self-acceptance, or you should write about
Mhm.
self-love or something today.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So then you apply your creativity and you just go free form at that point. You just get it all down. And then you turn to your intellect and you say, okay,
Yeah.
let's let's really now line by line edit this and let it give it some structure.
Yeah, I love the way you're describing this because it sounds, I mean, it's very similar to parts work, if you've done any parts work at all. But it's like there are these two different parts within you, and maybe sometimes they're in conflict, like your intellect is taking over when your inner voice is like trying to say something, but they also can work as a team. And, here's your part, and together they get to help you succeed and be that authentic self.
Oh, I love that. I haven't done parts work, but that sounds really interesting. And it's so true because we have all this creativity and we have our intellectual abilities and then we have our intuitive abilities. And really, the three are meant to harmonize together as a team, but starting right at from the beginning, our what gets squashed, our creativity and our intuition that work together, both those things get squashed for the most part, unless somebody happens to have an unusual childhood or something like that.
Mhm.
But it just happens. Oftentimes it's not like somebody's fault or something. It's just the way our whole society is set up.
Yeah.
But yes, bringing all those two together. And so now it's for so many people, that's what they circle back to, the
Mm.
creativity, getting in touch and also getting in touch with their feelings, getting in touch with their intuition, their inner guidance.
I can
So
see how passionate you are about this. And I can see that you really, like, you try to embody that. You really, I can feel that, like, you're trying to practice what you preach in all of this. And so I'm really curious if or how you noticed that nudge to write this book, or how these pieces kind of work together as a team as you were writing this book. Like, what did you get out of this when you followed that nudge and went, oh, that's why I had to do this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I didn't know for sure if it was going to be a book. At first, it would come to me like, let's say I would be taking a walk or something like that, taking the dog for a walk, and an idea would come to me, like, oh, write about that subject. Or also, I'd be thinking about when all the years of teaching intuitive development, what are the biggest stumbling blocks that people run into when they want to develop their intuition, when they want to heal themselves too, use meditation and their inner guidance as a way to heal themselves and up level their creativity in the broadest sense of the word. So I had a lot of thoughts about things that I wanted to write about. And then those ideas would just come when I was, once again, having a pause, right? When I was giving some space for the ideas to come versus if I just sat down and tried to really think through, oh, I got to think about this. I've got to write something and I got to think through what I'm going to write. Ooh, that never works for me. So then I would get the idea, come back to my desk and then start to write it down. And so after writing for a while, I was like, I think there's enough here to start to shape a book. And so I was definitely guided every step of the way
Yeah.
um, to write a specific kind of book because I really wanted to create a bridge between intuition and our everyday life. And I wanted to put it into language that anybody could understand. And I wanted to really normalize it so that it was really accessible to people. Like what's really happening kind of backstage with your, with your intellect and your intuition and your creativity. And how do you start to really distinguish which is what? And how do you also distinguish when you've absorbed energy from the world around you that you're carrying around? Because that's the other
Mm.
thing I really wanted to put in the book. So it's got 7 chapters. It's got like 20 exercises because each chapter has a bunch of exercises. And
Okay.
yeah, so I
I
I knew
love
I
this.
I knew that there had to be a lot of exercises, but
Hmm.
then I go in depth in each chapter
Mm.
on in different subject areas. Like there's a whole chapter talking about how we how our analyzing can get us stuck and how to get unstuck from analyzing. And then
Mm.
a chapter really talking about how being grounded helps us in so many ways. So there's a whole chapter about grounding with then grounding exercises. And so there's a whole chapter about asking questions as a way to bring ourselves into deeper awareness of who we are and how that can really guide us on our journey to being more intuitive and to growing and healing.
Mm.
So yeah, I was definitely guided to write a specific kind of book that I felt based on my experience teaching professionals all these years, it seemed like the most useful book because there's a lot of different ways I could have gone in the subject
Mhm.
area. When you talk about intuition, wow, okay, what area? And
Yeah, there's
so
so much you could talk about.
exactly. There's so many different ways you could go with it, intuitive development and or creativity. There's so many different ways you could go with it. So this was really a step-by-step process of asking what would be the most useful thing to go into this book? And then how do I shape it into a book in a way that's as digestible as possible, as easy as possible to integrate and to really apply in your everyday life. How do I bridge between kind of two worlds, the
Mhm.
sort of the intellectual world and our intuitive world?
Oh, okay. I love this so much because, intellectually, it's very easy to read these books and understand the concepts, right? There's so many psych books out there and neuropsych books and concept books and here, learn this idea that could make your life better. But being able to put it into practice, to actually try it, to actually integrate it, not just know the information, but believe the information. That is one of the hardest gaps to bridge. And it sounds like your book is attempting to do that. And that makes me so excited.
I love that you said that. That is true. Yes, that's what I'm hoping will come through in the book, that it's something that people can really integrate and practice. And because you're right, it's experiential. The only way for us to really grow and learn and heal is and tap into our intuition, it's all experiential. And so really it's so useful if we maintain our curiosity. That's why I think that curiosity and willingness, and then just kind of amping up our enthusiasm to keep growing and learning, really puts us into that experiential space. Once we decide and give ourselves permission to kind of take a pause from just being in the intellectual world, like a pause, when I say that, it could be for 5 minutes, then we can start to have more of an experience being in touch with our body, or being in touch with our mind, or our true feelings or thoughts.
Well, and slowing down in your experience of writing the book, I hear so many intellectual plans for writing a book, right? Like you have the concept, now you have to write this many words a day and it has to be like this. And I've even tried to sign up for programs that like hold you accountable of like, you have to choose this many words a day to try to write, and they don't work for me. And so hearing your experience, you really did slow down and go, I'm going to write a little bit here and then I need to pause. So I'm going to pause and a new idea will come to me and I'll write that down. And eventually you had this concept to turn into a book. It wasn't like, this is exactly what I'm going to write and I have to form every chapter perfectly and I have to get, 5,000 words a day. Like it seems very flexible, and allowing yourself to tap into that creativity in a way that really worked for you.
Yeah, I love that you're saying that and describing it like that, because it's really true. You can't force creativity and you can't force your intuition. And a lot of times when we do try to force things, we don't give it enough space and things tend to backfire, or what we start to create is not as authentic to ourselves as
Mhm.
we would like it to be. And then we look at it and we go, oh, I was forcing that to happen, or I was trying to do it like somebody else did. I was trying to follow the 1, 2, 3 that somebody else told me, and ooh, that doesn't work for me.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, I tried to make it as fun for myself as possible. There's
Yeah.
plenty of challenges when you get into the editing process, but I really had fun with the writing process.
Yeah.
That is really fun. But when and then when you just go and you have to edit it so many times over and over again to get it to a certain polished level.
You really need to tap into your intellect there.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where you tap into your will. So I think the process is, at first, you have to make it fun for yourself. You want to really make it a fun adventure, no effort, and don't stress yourself or pressure yourself. And the main thing is really getting away from all distractions, even if it's just for 20 minutes. Like I know so many listeners obviously have extremely busy lives, but just lock yourself in your room or your bathroom for 20 minutes or whatever it would be. No, just putting aside social media, putting aside any kinds of distractions, and then just giving yourself a pause, and then grounding yourself in some way, letting yourself be grounded, and then saying hello to that part of yourself that's there waiting, that's so creative and so intuitive, and asking, what is it that I'm here to say? What's aligned for me to say?
Where is that creativity guiding me towards? Because, for you, it was a book and teaching. For me, right now, it's this podcast. I am also writing a book. Hopefully, at some point, it will be done because I struggle to pause. Everything you're saying is resonating for me, but it could be parenting to the best of your ability, or getting into art, or making sure you go outside and go for a hike. right? Like that creativity could be anything.
Yeah, starting up a business, putting your creativity into building a house or something like that. It's bound. Our creativity is just it's innate to us and it can go wherever we direct it. As long as we do consciously direct it, then that's the ideal way to go.
I thought you were going to say limitless there. I'm not going to lie. So, is that why you chose that name for your book, Limitless? Or is there a different reason behind it?
Yeah, I mean, we are limitless. We do have limitless inner resources. Our imagination is limitless and it's extremely powerful. Everything begins in our imagination, really. And that's really also where healing happens, is in our imagination. But we think, oh, that's just in your imagination. We sort of poo-poo things like that. But our imagination is limitless. Our creativity is limitless. Our ability to tap into our inner knowing is limitless. And also our ability to keep growing our whole lives is limitless. And I think if we keep growing, we're always going to feel, what's the word? We're going to just be more excited about life. And so I think all of those aspects of ourselves, they're free. They come with us from the moment we're born. And so much of it is an underutilized resource. And we just have to say hello to it and start to make friends with it.
That resonates so deeply for me. Something that I always say is, I mean, you have to trust the process. And sometimes what comes up for you isn't going to be logical. It isn't going to make sense. There isn't going to be an obvious connection for why that's popping up in your brain. But if you can just accept that it might not be logical, but accept that it's coming up for you, well, then maybe that can lead you somewhere and eventually you might understand it.
Exactly. You want to keep trusting it so that then it can become more normalized in your everyday life.
Hmm. I am so excited for this book to come out.
It's yeah, it's going to be released May 27th. It's exciting. Can't believe.
So those of you listening, you can buy it in all sorts of places. I saw it at Barnes and Noble. Where else will it be available? Do you know?
Bookshop.org. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it, yeah, Barnes and Nobles. There's lots of places it's available, or you can order it through your local bookshop,
Yeah, request it.
your local
Mhm.
bookstore. You can just order it. So yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
It's available
what
wherever you get your books.
exactly.
Yes,
A
and I will be
friend.
putting a link in the description of this episode so people can find it. I will post it all over my social medias as well. Uh,
Right.
and so, as we're nearing the end of our hour here, I'm curious if there's anything we did not talk about that you'd like to take a moment to mention, or anything you just really want to emphasize for our listeners.
I guess there's one other thing that's nice to say hello to within ourselves, which is something that I call our inner laughter. And that really helps us to let go of stress and it helps us to tap into our inner guidance system. It helps us to be more creative. So we live in a very serious world, but it's really important to be able to just tap into our ability to laugh even when we're not laughing. It's more like a an energy that we can tap into. And if you've ever noticed in your life when you're laughing, you can't really hold on to anything, or when you're feeling really happy, right? You don't really hold on to that. It's more like the serious, heavy things that we hold on to. And so it's really worthwhile to consider nurturing, I would say, nurturing your ability to experience the quality of inner laughter, whether it's expressed as laughter or not. If you think about like the laughing Buddha, that symbol, just being able to remember that we do have that resource, that quality within ourselves. The way that children just laugh, they'll just laugh and laugh and laugh. And when they're laughing, they can't be controlled, right? There's just no, and they're just, and so that's something that in this busy world that we live in, and very chaotic and stressful world that we live in, it's easy to lose touch with that, but it's important to remember that we do have that within ourselves, and we can ignite that by finding ways to laugh. We might watch a funny movie or something like that, or go laugh with a friend, but just remembering that we have that within ourselves, and it's very healing.
You don't have to take life quite so seriously.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good tool. And the more serious it gets, sometimes the more we need to tap into that ability that we have in ourselves to find some levity, I think would be the word, within ourselves. It's there.
And I think it's so beautiful because laughter isn't an emotion, it's an experience, right? Which means laughter can exist within any emotion you're feeling. So whether it's grief or fear or sadness or anger or joy or just
Mhm.
calm or contentedness, like you can find that laughter throughout any experience you're having if you're willing to look for it.
Yes, exactly. And that's what I always, whenever I get into a grumpy zone, or I start to feel stressed or overwhelmed, I'll tap into that. And it's amazing how quickly I'll start to change my whole energy and my mindset. And it just opens up more space to just pause and be myself and keep things in perspective. It helps us to keep things in perspective and to remember that we can get through hard things.
We can. And so I feel like my biggest takeaway from this conversation is no matter the experience, no matter who you are, no matter what you're passionate about or interested in, or wherever you are in this world, there is a path for you. And you just need to remember to slow down, to pause, and to be able to notice when your body or your mind is even pulling you in any direction. And if you can hold life lightly, if you can laugh with it, if you can find those ways to pause, to even notice that pull, then you will find that path to your authentic self.
Yes, and you can just make it a fun practice for yourself, a new decision of how you'd like to experience life every day, or like to experience even a little part of your day. And then it grows and grows.
And if you want a step by step process on how to do this, buy Gwyneth's book, practice all the exercises, make it more comfortable so that over time that skill can strengthen and then you just do it naturally.
Yeah, the book gives you an intuitive tools toolbox, basically.
I love it. I love it. I'm so excited. People need this in their lives. Thank you. Thank you for coming on this podcast. Thank you for promoting your book with me. Thank you for talking about intuition and creativity and just laughing with me. This has been so fun.
Thank you so much. It's been really delightful to be here. I've loved every minute of it.
For any of you who have listened to my past episodes, you know that I love talking about the conflict that we have within us because we all have it. And chatting with Gwyneth about the push and pull between our creativity and our intellectual parts of ourselves and how to tap in to our intuition to stay authentic to ourselves, it was such a powerful conversation. And I am so grateful that we were able to have it today and that you were able to listen to it. Hopefully, something we talked about today resonated with you. If it did, let yourself sit with that idea for a little while longer. If you have any questions for this podcast and any themes you'd like us to focus on in the future, send us a message on Instagram at insightswithuspodcast or send us an email at insightswithus@gmail.com. Again, you can find Gwyneth at Gwyneth R. Flack Or you can find her website at gwynethflack.com. You can find her book Limitless anywhere you find your books. If you enjoyed this podcast and you want to hear more, please follow, like, or subscribe. If you want to support the continuation of this podcast, you can donate. To do so, find me, Anastasia Soroka, on buymeacoffee.com. You can also find Insights with Us on Patreon for exclusive video content. I appreciate you, and I appreciate that you are listening. Thank you for creating insight with us.